State of cannabis.
This is the State of Cannabis News Digest, a roundup of this week's key developments in the cannabis industry. Our top stories.
At the federal level, the White House is pressing ahead with a historic shift, directing agencies to finalize the reclassification of cannabis under federal law, while Congress debates sweeping online safety rules that could reshape how legal cannabis businesses reach adult consumers. In the states, the picture is more fragmented. In the South, long-delayed medical cannabis programs in Alabama and Kentucky are finally inching toward patients, though tight restrictions and limited supply mean access will come slowly. In the Midwest, Minnesota is expanding its adult use market through new agreements with tribal nations, while Missouri moves to tighten oversight of its social equity microbusiness licenses after allegations of abuse. Elsewhere, regulators are grappling with the gray zone of hemp-derived THC. Michigan and New Jersey are advancing new legislation to pull intoxicating hemp products into their licensed cannabis systems, aiming to close loopholes that have allowed potent products to spread beyond regulated stores. New York, meanwhile, is adjusting its seed-to-sale tracking rollout to avoid disrupting holiday sales as the state transitions to a new compliance system. And in Maine, voters may soon be asked a far more fundamental question: whether to unwind adult use legalization altogether, setting up a high-stakes fight over a market that now supports thousands of jobs. Those are the headlines. Stay with us as we dig into the details behind each of these stories, the policy debates driving them, and what they mean for patients, businesses, and regulators across the country.
And now here is the deeper look at the key events in the cannabis world this week.
President Donald Trump signed an executive order this week directing the federal government to speed up the reclassification of cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act. Under the order, marijuana would move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, a category the Drug Enforcement Administration defines as having a moderate to low potential for dependence. Cannabis has been classified as Schedule 1 since 1970, alongside substances like heroin and the like. Speaking in the Oval Office, Trump called the move common sense, tying it to medical needs, including chronic pain. The order instructs Attorney General Pam Bondi to conclude a rescheduling process that has already been underway for more than a year and to move toward publishing a final rule. The directive also calls for expanded research into medical marijuana and CBD. A senior administration official said the goal is to remove barriers that have limited scientific study while still restricting products that pose serious health risks. Trump emphasized that the order does not legalize marijuana nationwide and does not sanction recreational use. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the move a step in the right direction, while arguing that broader reforms are still needed. This isn't the first time a rescheduling push has raised expectations. In 2022, the Biden administration directed federal health agencies to begin a similar review of marijuana's classification, a process that moved slowly through federal channels and never produced a final rule. That effort effectively stalled after President Trump returned to office for a second term, leaving the industry once again in a holding pattern. For cannabis businesses and advocates, the history is a reminder that executive action can signal intent, but doesn't guarantee follow-through. Until a final rule is published and implemented, rescheduling remains a promise rather than a completed policy change.
As President Trump's executive order accelerates the shift of medical cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, cannabis policy is no longer theoretical. It's happening in real time. And in Texas, one event is making sure that change is guided by facts, research, and responsible leadership. The Texas Cannabis Policy Conference, hosted by the Texas Cannabis Policy Center, returns January 29th through 31st at the Thompson Conference Center on the University of Texas at Austin campus. Under the theme, Maintaining Momentum for Effective Cannabis Policy, this three-day conference brings together lawmakers, physicians, researchers, regulators, and advocates to examine what national policy changes mean for Texas, from medical access and public safety to regulation, innovation, and civic engagement. This is where serious conversations happen. No hype, just evidence-based policy and practical solutions for the road ahead. Registration is open now at texascannabisconference.org. Students attend free with registration. That's texascannabisconference.org, where Texas comes together to shape the future of responsible cannabis policy.
Alabama's long and often stalled medical cannabis rollout reached a new milestone this week. The Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission approved 3 dispensary licenses, clearing what appears to be the final major regulatory barrier to opening the program to patients. The licenses went to 3 businesses, with a possible 4th approval expected early next year. Medical cannabis was legalized in Alabama in 2021, but lawsuits and administrative disputes slowed nearly every stage of implementation. While growers and processors were licensed earlier, dispensaries remained the missing link. Commission officials say some cultivators are already harvesting, suggesting the supply chain is nearly ready. Still, access will not be immediate. Physicians must be certified to recommend cannabis, patients must enroll in the registry, and dispensaries must complete inspections. Regulators now estimate that sales may begin in 2026. Alabama's program is tightly limited, allowing only non-smokable forms such as tablets, tinctures, oils, patches, and restricted gummies. For patient advocates, the vote represents long-awaited progress. For businesses, it signals that the market may finally open, though under close oversight and with legal questions still unresolved.
Kentucky has moved one step further. The state's first licensed medical cannabis dispensary opened on December 13th. The Post dispensary began operations nearly 1 year after medical marijuana became legal, and months after patients began receiving recommendations without access to products. The opening marks steady progress, but challenges remain. Only 4 cultivators are currently approved statewide, limiting supply for nearly 24,000 registered patients. State officials say more than 40 additional dispensaries are licensed and preparing to open, suggesting that access will expand gradually. Kentucky law restricts medical cannabis to non-smokable forms, including edibles, pills, beverages, and topicals. Supporters say the program provides relief for patients with serious conditions, while critics continue to raise concerns about public safety and regulation. Industry projections suggest sales could grow quickly, though competition from hemp-derived THC products and shifting federal rules may shape how the market develops in its first full year.
In Minnesota, regulators are taking a different approach to expanding access. Governor Tim Walz and the Minnesota Office of Cannabis Management announced a cooperative agreement with the Red Lake Nation, setting terms for adult-use cannabis production and distribution connected to tribal operations. State officials say the agreement protects public health and safety while supporting tribal sovereignty. The partnership also creates a new pathway for state-licensed businesses to access cannabis supply as Minnesota's adult-use market continues to take shape. Per the statement from the Red Lake Nation chair, Darrell Secchi Sr., the tribe has focused on producing cannabis products free from toxins and impurities, with testing confirming those standards. Red Lake also plans to sell its products more widely across Minnesota. The tribe's native care dispensary was the first in the state to sell legal adult-use cannabis after legalization took effect in August of 2023. Minnesota officials say negotiations are ongoing with other tribal nations, and more agreements are expected.
Michigan lawmakers are moving to rein in intoxicating hemp-derived THC products that have been widely sold in places where marijuana typically cannot be, including gas stations, convenience stores, and online marketplaces. On Wednesday night, The Michigan Senate passed a package of bipartisan bills that would create an Industrial Hemp Processing Act and repeal the state's 2014 hemp research law. Under the proposal, non-consumable hemp products like textiles would be deregulated. Non-intoxicating consumable hemp would be explicitly allowed. But products with intoxicating THC effects, including synthetic or hemp-based THC, would be regulated by the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. The bills define consumable hemp as products containing less than 0.3% THC and staying under a total THC cap set by regulators. Products exceeding either limit would be treated as marijuana, requiring licensed production, testing, packaging, and retail sales. Supporters say the goal is to close legal gray areas and reduce the sale of untested products, including to minors. Industry representatives argue the state is losing tax revenue to products sold outside the regulated cannabis system.
New Jersey lawmakers are pursuing a similar strategy, with a bill that would align state hemp rules with tightening federal definitions. Senate Bill 4509 advanced through the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee on December 15th and now awaits consideration in the General Assembly. The bill limits hemp to 0.3% total THC, including THCA, and caps hemp-derived cannabinoid products at 0.4 milligrams of THC per container. Products exceeding those limits would be regulated as cannabis under New Jersey law. The legislation also updates the state's definition of THC to explicitly include Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, THCA, and similar variants. Businesses selling products above the new hemp limits would have until March 13th of 2026 to sell down inventory. After that, continued sales would require cannabis licensing, with escalating civil fines for violations. One carve-out applies to hemp-derived THC beverages. Starting March 13th, certain beverages could be sold in liquor stores under strict rules, but only until November 13th of 2026. After that, they would be regulated like other cannabis products.
In New York, regulators are adjusting the rollout of a new seed-to-sale tracking system after pushback from licensees. The Office of Cannabis Management, working with Metrc, announced it will provide 20 million retail item identifiers at no cost to licensed processors. These identifiers track products from cultivation through sale and are considered central to consumer safety and recall systems. Retailers must still complete Metrc credentialing by December 17th. However, they now have until January 12th of next year to enter existing inventory into the system, a change intended to avoid disruptions during the holiday shopping season. OCM officials acknowledged the transition from BioTrack to Metrc was abrupt and said they heard requests for more flexibility. Once fully implemented, the system will allow consumers to scan QR codes for lab results and recall information. Regulators also say Metrc is building tools to flag delinquent payments and reduce reliance on third-party software.
Missouri regulators are proposing changes to the state's Cannabis Microbusiness Program, a social equity track created under the state's 2022 legalization amendment. The program was designed to provide ownership opportunities for eligible applicants, including people with past marijuana offenses, certain low-income individuals, and disabled veterans. But investigators say some applicants were recruited into the licensing lottery and later signed contracts that limited their control and profits. The Missouri Division of Cannabis Regulation has opened a public comment period on proposed rule changes, running through January 14th. The state plans to finalize the amendments in early 2026, ahead of the third licensing round. The changes would require earlier review of operating and financing agreements, stricter disclosure of contracts affecting ownership or control, and clearer standards for what it means to be majority-owned and operated. The push follows the revocation of 35 microbusiness licenses, including 22 involving contracts drafted by the law firm Armstrong Teasdale, With many revocations still under appeal, the firm disputes the state's characterization of the agreements.
In Maine, the future of adult-use cannabis itself may soon be up for debate. State election officials approved a citizen-led ballot initiative that would repeal recreational marijuana legalization. If the measure qualifies and voters approve it, adult-use cannabis sales would end by January of 2028. The proposal targets a market that generates roughly $250 million a year and supports thousands of jobs. Adult-use sales began in 2020, following a narrow voter approval in 2016, and have produced more than $700 million in total revenue. The initiative would still allow adults to possess small amounts of cannabis and would keep medical marijuana legal, though with stricter testing and tracking requirements. Supporters argue legalization has created enforcement challenges tied to illicit grows. Critics counter that regulatory gaps, not legalization, are the problem. Organizers must gather nearly 68,000 signatures to place the measure on the ballot.
Finally, a federal debate that could affect how legal cannabis businesses reach adult customers online. The U.S. House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee advanced 18 child online safety and privacy bills, including updated versions of the Kids Online Safety Act and the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act. The measures would restrict covered platforms from facilitating advertising of cannabis, tobacco, alcohol, gambling, and narcotics to users the platform knows are minors. Lawmakers clashed over the scope of the bills, with Democrats warning about broad preemption language and members of both parties criticizing big tech influence.
This was the State of Cannabis News Digest, available weekly. You can listen to us on all main podcast platforms. To make sure you don't miss out on the latest updates and in-depth analysis of the cannabis industry, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. By subscribing, you'll get notifications for each new episode, helping you stay informed and ahead in the ever-evolving cannabis market. Join us next Saturday for more insights. Until then, keep thriving and stay green.